Hello everyone and welcome to this video that I'm recording for Derby Research School. I'm Claire Williams, I'm Deputy Head Teacher and Research School Director from Alexandra Park Primary School, which is in Greater Manchester, and I'm also the EEF Research School Content Lead for Early Years, and I'm very happy to be doing this walkthrough of the Early Years Evidence Store. So this video is really to sort of support you in accessing the Early Years Evidence Store, a really fabulous resource that we have that's free for all educators. Anybody can access it. But as with everything, sometimes we need a little bit of a guide and some help to sort of walk through what you can use the evidence for the early years evidence store for and how to get the most out of it. So first of all, it's absolutely brilliant that you're watching this video, that you've clicked and you're accessing it. We know that high quality education and care is positive for all children, but for those youngest children, we know it can have really strong effects, but particularly benefits those children who are economically disadvantaged, and the effect size are greater. So that's why this is critically important, whatever your role in early education. And whatever setting you are working at, whether working in, using the best available evidence alongside our professional knowledge and understanding of our context, communities, families, and children to translate the evidence into actionable practice and approaches in our settings is exactly what we need to be doing. And that's where the early years evidence store can really help. We know that making changes to practice is really hard, and we're all really busy and have competing demands on our time. This is a resource that can cut through some of that and can really support you in your work. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the early years evidence store and what it is, also what it isn't, and I'm going to guide you through an example of how to use it based on an identified priority. So, why does the EEF Early Years Evidence Store exist? So, it's really important to note that using research evidence can help you reflect on your practice, and it can help you to support other people within your setting to do the same. But it can't tell you what to do. It can't give you the silver bullet, the answers that we all so desperately want quickly. So it's really, really crucial that we use our knowledge of our children and our communities alongside the research evidence. And when we do that, when we develop that practice by combining our understanding of research evidence with our professional expertise, then that's when we're going into the space of developing evidence-informed practice. And the Early Years Evidence Store has been designed to help you do exactly that. So there are 6 key themes that relate to young children's learning and development. And I'll show you them on the landing page for the Early Years Evidence Store, and we'll go through that in real time. But the 6 themes are communication, language, personal, social, and emotional development, self-regulation and executive function, physical development, early literacy, and early maths. So you can see how they align really well with the work that you'll be doing, and hopefully how you can identify a priority and start to explore that further. So within each theme, there's a summary of evidence-informed approaches that help you to understand and reflect on your practice. And this is relatively quick, and it's a really accessible way to engage with robust research evidence. So if you don't have time to download and read all of the papers and all of the other ways we can access robust research evidence, and this is a really good way to make a start. And actually, if you want to go deeper, there's technical summaries of the evidence related to each of the areas too. So within each approach, everyday practices are described to support you in delivering the approach within your setting. So there are written and video examples which help you to put the research evidence into practice. And the evidence store includes what educators can do to support children's learning and development, how they can put those approaches into action, and why those approaches are important and what research evidence says about them. So It doesn't include some really crucial aspects of high quality provision, which are really important, but they're outside of the scope of the evidence store. And those are aspects such as leadership, funding, premises and space, curriculum planning and assessment. I will at the end talk to you about the pupil premium guidance that we have for early years, which does address some of those aspects, particularly leadership, but we'll come to that at the end. But the early years evidence store isn't about those things. So getting ready and thinking about the best way to use the store then, really thinking about using it as a reflection tool, as a tool for discussion, for reflection, for really taking a step back and thinking about what's happening currently in your setting and how can the research evidence help to support that. It's also really good for team discussion. So watching a video of practice together and getting a discussion going, that really sort of great activity of somebody else's session, somebody else's setting, and taking out the personalized, this is what we do, this is what you've done. Let's sort of take the personalized out of it and use some of the videos and the research evidence summaries to really think about that in terms of what does this mean for us. So it's great for that. It's really great for collaborative working in your teams. And also the most obvious way of using this is for professional development, and I'll signpost you to the early years professional development guide as well, because that has some really key recommendations about how to put some of these practices into and approaches into your setting using really high quality professional development, which we know is a challenge for all of us, but is absolutely key to embedding and sustaining an approach. So I'm going to start screen sharing and I'm going to show you what the early years evidence store looks like. Many of you will be really familiar with this. It is going through some changes at the moment. So parts of it look different, parts of it have been updated, and other parts that is in progress. So I'll start sharing and then I'll talk you through how you might use it. We have used the early years evidence store in lots of ways, and we have contributed some videos, and you'll just have to excuse me sort of flicking around from screens, but just making sure that I've got the right screen. Okay. So here you can see the landing page. So if you type in EEF Early Years Evidence Store, this is where you should land, and you can see it's in beta, so it's being updated. Now, because there is such a wealth of information on this part of the EEF website, it can be quite overwhelming sometimes. So all I'm going to do is just walk you through where to find some of the key materials that will help you. So there is a really great how to use the evidence store that you can download. But these are the key themes, and you can see each of the key themes has a click through. We've also got some frequently asked questions, and I'll come back to this keep exploring part at the end because that's really important that you have a look at that as well. So if we take communication language, I'd be surprised if there is a setting that isn't prioritising and working on their approaches and practices to communication language. You'll see that we've got an overview and then some more click-throughs that we can go through, and you'll see the lovely Fliss there from East London Research School, who you'll know if you've looked at any of the Shrek materials, and if you haven't, and I'm sure you have because most people have, they are absolutely excellent and a really strong way to translate evidence into practice. So for each of the themes within the evidence store, you have an overview. And I won't go through this and read this. This is for you to come back to. But as you scroll down, you'll see that there is lots of information to digest. So one of the big sort of recommendations here is to make sure you've got time to really do this justice and to think about the recommendations. So for each area then, we've got approaches that support, in this example, the linguistic aspects of communication and the cognitive. And there's some examples there, and you can see that they relate to the areas that you can click through. There's also an accessible sort of what does the evidence tell us? So really important that we sort of look at that, and there'll be recommendations. For example, we've got the recommendation here of an evidence-informed program, intervention program, Nellie, that you may be aware of, that you can click through and consider that as part of your approach. Then thinking about putting the evidence into action, this is a really important part, and this is applicable for all of the themes. It's really important that if you just look at the depth and breadth here, just of 1 out of 6 themes, using all 5 approaches in your practice, which you will be doing, it's unlikely that just choosing one is going to help you secure enough progress. So we recommend using multiple approaches and using the different areas to combine and underpin effective communication language. Now, to do that, you need to focus on developing one of the practices first, and that might happen alongside another practice, and there's lots of professional development models and ways of doing that. But we just encourage you for all of the themes to think about it's a combined effort to secure, particularly for those economically disadvantaged pupils. They need a lot more of everything, and as much as you can give them. So we would then carry on and read through, and really importantly, there's links. Obviously, the early education and care is completely related in all different ways and in all the areas that we work. So there will be sort of nods and prompts to other areas. And you can also click on. So this is really important, I think, particularly when you're using this with other people or people that are new to EYFS, or you're doing some professional development. There's some really helpful sort of definitions of what in this context, in the early years evidence store, the words mean. So deepening understanding of vocabulary. For example, self-regulation in this context is how children monitor their emotions and thoughts and adapt their behaviour to different circumstances. So really sort of good in getting that shared language across your setting and really unpicking. So what do we mean by self-regulation? Okay, this is one definition. Is this going to be helpful? So just a little sort of side tip there. So as we go through then the overview, this is a summary poster here. And you'll just see a little note there while things are in development that sometimes there might be a difference in wording, but it's all in hand and it will be updated soon. If you want to follow up on any references or do any further reading, there's a really handy references guide there. And then it goes into the actual approaches in practice. So as we go through then, so if we go to teaching and modelling vocabulary, you'll see that there's a description of what we mean by this. Again, some of the problems I think we have in education is that we've got lots of different meanings for different terms, and this is actually really useful, as I've said, to think about what that means in your setting and to get a shared language and shared understanding. So in this case, teaching and modelling vocabulary is when the educator intentionally introduces new words and their meanings to support children's receptive vocabulary, and then they encourage children to use new words in context, their expressive vocabulary. So hopefully you can see, if you're doing some professional development, this is really useful, it's really simple, and it's really accessible. So then there will be an example. What does the evidence say? So what do we know about this? And we know that there's really strong evidence for this particular area, that teaching and modelling vocabulary can have a positive effect on children's oral language skills. And for many things that the early years evidence store communicates, the effect size is usually more for children from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. And that's really important because there's a lot that we can do with these evidence-informed approaches that really benefit those children that need it most. So what you want to get to, you're busy, you're in your setting, you want to put the approach into action. So there's some ways of doing that. So for example, naming and labeling. So you'll be really familiar with that. We all do that in our practice, but really thinking about that in terms of what that looks like. You can then go down, and again, we've got the detailed summary of evidence there, but really importantly, we've got the approach in action. And what I would say when you are watching these videos, so we've had EEF come and film at our setting, and it is absolutely what is happening day in, day out, and what those settings are doing. Um, Particularly if you're watching this with other people and you're leading some professional development, or even if you're watching it yourself, try to move away from the initial or what's happening and try to really focus on the approach. I'd really encourage you to do that. It's really easy to go, oh, I love that display, or I wouldn't do it like that, or I would do it like that. But it's really important to sort of think about in terms of um, what the educator in the video is exemplifying, so he's showing you and how the children are responding and what that means for your practice. So as we go down, you can also then see an explanation of what the practices are. So I won't show you the video, we haven't got time for that, but hopefully you can have a really good look. And I would encourage you to watch the full video for each approach or practice that you're considering in its entirety, first of all, and get a feel for that and watch the whole video. They're very short, they're between 3 and 4 or 5 minutes long. But then, really importantly, this part where the website goes into the practices that you will have seen, this is where you can really drill into something. So, for example, we'll keep with the example of commenting. You can go to the commenting. Squeeze harder. Harder. And you can go straight to the part and really unpick. For example, here where the educator has articulated an observation to highlight information. It's that harder vocabulary, really sort of accentuating that. So really brilliant for professional development. Then you've also got some other examples here, and it's worth noting, and depending on what setting or what age of children you are with, you can look at childminders, you can look at nursery settings, you can look at school-based settings, and it talks to you about how old the children are. So in this example, most of the children are 3 and 4 in the videos. There are videos of younger children, and there are videos of really diverse settings. So I'd encourage you to have a look at those. So then you'll go through and you'll click through the communication language theme and the approaches that are within that theme. So already we're only in one theme and one aspect of that. So you can see how there's a vast amount of information, and what you really need to do now is think about what that means for you, and think about how you are going to identify a priority and how that priority focuses on the needs of the children. Really thinking about selecting a theme that's most important to you in your setting. And for example, communication and language, you might choose that because your setting might have children with delayed communication. You might have identified that through various ways as something that is a professional development need, for example. So once you've read the overview, and that's a top level summary of the document, we've then got the teaching approaches. I've already talked to you about having a look at the theme and the whole and downloading the additional materials. So then you're at the approach. So thinking about which approach is the best fit for your setting, and then really focusing on that description and really having a shared understanding of that. So as you go through, you'll see that then you can really sort of deepen your understanding of the evidence behind the approach. And just as you're doing that, we'd really encourage you to check It's relevant and it's feasible to implement. Have you got those implementation conditions ready in your setting? And I'd signpost you here to the EEF guide to implementation, um, which would support you with that. Um, but really thinking about, for example, if you choose interactive reading, there's really strong evidence for interactive reading. Um, and there's promise that that can improve communication and language, but it needs to be implemented really well so that it has the best chance of success. And is that feasible at the moment? So you might need to have a think about some implementation activities, particularly professional development, and thinking about that alongside your other practice, because we know that these approaches have the most impact when they are done alongside each other and implemented really well. So just going back through, coming back onto the evidence store, I'm going to click back through so we end up on the landing page again. So essentially you can, let's just go back. You can click on the themes and have a look and think about what your priorities might be. As well as that, we've got a lot more resources and materials for you to explore. So the Early Years Hub includes the Early Years Toolkit, which is a really accessible summary, and it's a live summary. There's a how it works area. So I'd really encourage you to have a look at that. There's some, so if we click onto the communication language strand, you'll see the implementation cost, how much on average it costs. There's really helpful little, if you just sort of hover over. So that's the average cost, the evidence strength. So that's a rating that provides an overall estimate of the robustness, and that can really support your decision making. And the impact measure. And I'm just going to very quickly scroll down and you can see that there's key findings, how effective is the approach, and particularly have a look at this, why it's effective in closing the disadvantage gap and how you could implement it. So these things work alongside each other. So you'll see the early years evidence stories referenced there, and you'll see the putting evidence to work, a school's guide to implementation is referenced there. So again, we can there's lots of sort of rabbit holes that you'll go down with the EEF website, and it's just making sure that you are understanding where everything is. So you'll see there's another click through from the themes there. And then we go back to the early years evidence store. We've also got the Early Years Pupil Premium Guide. So with that uplift in funding, it's really important that this Early Years Pupil Premium Guide is used effectively. And again, this will be familiar to you now, but you've got the overview, and then you've got the recommendations for how to really make the most out of that funding, and why it matters, and really thinking about your strategy and how you can really have a really effective, robust strategy. Going back. Oh, I lost my mouse. There it is. If you haven't seen this, and I think most early years educators have probably had a look at this already, but again, really good to come back to. This area of the Early Years Hub is really focused on high quality interactions. So we know that this is a really strong area that can have a really big impact on children's education and development. So we have the Shrek approach and the STAIRS model as part of the strategies. I'd really encourage you to go through these and really think about what this looks like in your setting. There's some useful links. So, for example, there to the disadvantage gap research and what that tells us. And again, we've got some promising evidence-informed programs there that can support you in your work. So lots and lots to explore and to digest. We've also just very quickly got lots of blogs and articles here that can help you sort of navigate some of this and give examples of how people have in their own settings or working with other people. So, for example, the Shrek approach, or that's a really lovely video there about modeling vocabulary. So, the challenge here, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Um, she says, there we go, stop sharing. And okay. So the challenge here is not, is there materials, is there evidence, is there things that we can use within our settings? It's how do we use them, and what's the best way of making the most of these materials? So really thinking about when you select your approach, really considering your context, your children, your communities, your families, and what would be using evidence from your own setting. So what are families telling you? How are children presenting? What are your staff talking about? What's your real priority that you want to work on? Then going to those 6 themes and thinking, okay, is there something in here that can help us with this? So we know from the early years evidence store that there is a strong evidence base for those practices, but we also know that there's not one way of doing something, and that contextual translating those practices and approaches into your setting is really, really, really important. So also essential is that reflective practice that talked about right at the start, really thinking about this as collaborative work that you're doing together with families, with all of the services that are wrapped around your setting, and most importantly with the people that are delivering these approaches, your staff. Monitoring is something that we all find hard, monitoring and evaluation of something you've implemented. Make sure that you're doing that from the start, that you're really thinking about if you're going to implement an approach, then you're thinking about how are you going to know whether it's having an impact, and who is benefiting and how are you going to know about that. So checking what's working, making sure that particularly those children from economically disadvantaged backgrounds are really benefiting and it's matched to their needs, and then adjusting the approach as you're going along, maybe, or thinking about how to improve it and how to really sort of understand the impact as an ongoing activity. So key messages then, evidence informs practice, and that is the way that the early years evidence store can really support you. Reflection is really, really important, that ongoing sort of questioning and a reflection of your practice and making those changes. Small changes really matter. So, for example, in high quality interactions, small tweaks and changes to practice can have a really big impact over time, and really thinking about that collaborative approach, and really importantly, professional development for your team, the people that are doing these practices and approaches every day. So thank you for listening and for taking an interest in the early years evidence store. It's an absolutely wonderful, wonderful resource that we've got as educators, and it's really important that we get the most out of it. There's lots of other EEF materials and resources to support your work in early years, so I'd encourage you to go on the website, have a look and click through. And thank you for your time.